Protection is a powerful weapon, and there's an old saying that there is safety in numbers, but I say protection goes a long way. Protection is also a necessity. Hello, and welcome to the webinar for today. My name is Maxine Telford Wolf, and just to tell you a little bit about me, I was born and raised on the East Coast from grade school to grad school, and then I later relocated to the West Coast where I've been living for the past 18 years. I'm a mother of 3 very active children, so they keep me on my toes. For years, I was actually a children's social worker, and then I joined the law enforcement with LA County, and that is where I'm still gainfully employed. Protection, security, and advocating for the rights of others is something that falls within the scope of my job duties, but it's also a responsibility that I have 24/7. And with that said, protection is something that you'll hear me mention quite a bit today. But before we begin, I would just ask that you like, share, and send this presentation to other people so that they may join in with us and receive some information that is free, valuable, and hopefully very helpful. Protection is something that, again, I value. I think most people do, and it came at the right time for me. I emphasize that word protection because when I had a situation that had compromised the protection of my personal rights as well as protecting my good name, I had someone that would, could, and did look out for my rights as well as restore my personal peace of mind. And just to give you my personal testimony, about 8.5 years ago, my husband and I had sold a piece of property that we had. With the money that we received, some of that money we used so that I could pay off debts that I had incurred. Well, after I had paid off all my debts, I received letters from these various companies saying that I had a zero balance, yada, 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 which is good. And I kept that as my receipt as well. So when I contacted some of these creditors to ask them why some of these items had not been removed from my credit, they all came back with the same answer, which was basically give us about 30 days and then you'll start to see those items fall off. And I said, okay, that's fine. Well, 30 days came and went, nothing happened, and I didn't say anything. I didn't panic. And then about 45 days came and went, and still there was no change, but I didn't react just yet. Then we hit actually 120 days, so that's already about 4 months right there. There was no change in my information. How do I know that? Because when my husband and I went to look at other properties and I authorized people to run my credit, all of these different items that I had already paid off were still showing up on my credit. So livid is the term that would best describe me. Just like the Incredible Hulk, when he gets when he gets angry, he metamorphoses and turns green. Well, I turned red because, again, I felt I'd been made a series of promises, and ultimately lied to. So after I got angry, I got up and I said, wait a minute. That aha moment came where it dawned on me, it reminded me that I have something. I do have a weapon that I could use. The plan is in my hands. So what I did is I took out that information that I had and I contacted my attorney that I have, that I still use to this day, who was able to go ahead and help me in that situation. And to cut to the chase, basically what they did is I contacted them, and it was already after hours. And they went ahead, they took my information as well as my ID number. I spoke to the clerk and just gave her a brief summary of what was going on. She said that she would have my attorney contact me within they have technically 8 hours, or if it's already after hours, they have the 24-hour turnover. And I said, that's perfectly okay. Again, this was after hours, so I'm thinking I wouldn't speak to anyone that evening. But lo and behold, 40 minutes later, almost 42 minutes later to be exact, I received a call from my attorney. So I was pleasantly shocked because I just didn't think it was going to happen that evening. but they called me, and I apprised my attorney of the situation in its entirety. So my attorney had me to fax over to him all the different documents I had, the receipts, the letters indicating that I had a zero balance, as well as the credit report, because the credit score was showing a score of 530, which is just ugly. I faxed over all that information, took about a good 30 minutes. And then my attorney called me back to let me know that they received that information, which I really appreciated because it kept me in the loop and it took some of the worrying and waiting off of my shoulders because I was already stressed out about it. So when they looked at it and they reviewed it, they said to me, Maxine, you know what? Give us about 7 to 10 days to really get this going and work through this. And I said, sure, no problem, do your thing. Well, I hadn't even hit day 7. And in the interim, I got a phone call from Experian, which is one of those 3 credit reporting bureaus. And the supervisor was calling to apologize to me. He apologized profusely for the quote unquote gross oversight on their part. Well, I admit I was a little bit snobbish, and I said to them that, your apology just comes too late because the properties we were interested in have either, one, been sold or they have gone up in price. So I really wasn't interested in hearing your little apology, which just made the man apologize even more, to the point that it was almost a little bit nauseating. But he had shared with me that he had received a letter from my attorney, and I believed him, and I said, yeah, I'm sure that you did. And I knew that he did because I received a copy of that letter that was sent out on my behalf. And people, let me tell you, it was intimidating. It was almost scathing. And then I remember when I read through it, it had said that our client, Maxine Telford Wolf, has retained our services. She has informed us that she had spoke with you to have these different items removed off of her credit, and that she was assured that this would be done within 30 days. You have had ample time. There has been no action. Currently, you are in violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And if you do not respond to this letter within 30 days, further legal action will be taken. So just the power of that letter and what was stated in that letter got the balls rolling. It initiated some change, and people finally got up and did the job that they should have done months ago. I attribute that to sheer laziness. But when I looked at that letter, even though I started to shake and say, wow, this is intimidating, I had to remind myself that this was my legal army. They were providing that backup for me, and it felt good to know that somebody was in my corner. So with that said, I decided to go ahead and have my credit run again. My husband advised me to just kind of wait it out and let them get their stuff done, because they assured me that they would take care of it within 48 hours and send me a fresh credit report within 7 to 15 business days. So I said, I just want to go ahead and try. And I knew I was taking a chance, but it wasn't even the 2-week mark. I had my credit run, and this time I saw a major hike in my credit score. It went up about 200 points. So it put me at about 730. And I felt vindicated, I felt liberated, and I felt finally I had been heard. So even though I had to go through that situation, which I didn't like, the outcome was something that I did like, and something that I'm happy to share with people, because again, it speaks to the power of the service that I had used. So it's not just something that I personally promote, but it's something that I believe in because I've experienced it. And that's just basically my testimony with regards to what I wanted to share with you today. Know something, that you are entitled. Okay. Now ask yourself that same question. What about your rights? And I don't just mean the preamble to the Constitution, which talks about the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which we are all guaranteed, but just the basic rights. Most people aren't even cognizant of the fact that they have rights, or what rights they actually really do have, and how to utilize them in a particular situation. So I'll ask this question as well. Are you to protect yourself? Are you prepared to protect your family, and definitely your loved ones? Because our loved ones do indeed matter. We place value on them. Are you prepared to protect your property, your finances, your personal freedom? God forbid if you're the victim of identity theft. You want to protect what is yours, and protection that ensures is definitely important. Here's something else to also consider. And a lot of times we don't really think about it until we're in that situation. What is your plan of action if you encounter an unforeseeable emergency or other type of situation that requires some form of counsel? I ask people, do you have a lot of power or clout in the courtroom? Or as the young generation likes to say, do you have the hookup with a judge or attorney? I hear that a lot of times with the kids that I deal with in the halls and camps about how they're cool with their judge. But cool only goes so far. When you're dealing with a serious matter or, a serious situation, what is your plan of action? And a lot of times we simply do not think about that until we're in a situation. Now, if you're a person who's financially secure, what I call protection for the wealthy, and you fall into a particular tax bracket, people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, or Donald Trump, Oprah Winfrey, the TV mogul, the Queen TV mogul, Bill Gates, George Bush Sr., then professional representation isn't really a challenge for you. But if you are not one of those, what I call financially well-off wonders, and that accounts for probably anywhere from 95 to 98% of Americans, then that professional representation is not so affordable. It's not so easily attainable. Things change quickly. We are already in this society. We're paying an arm and a leg to secure legal representation. People have gone near broke behind it, broken their piggy bank, okay, and whatever other money they had saved up to try to go ahead and save their situation. You pay for the privilege to speak to a licensed attorney, and in doing so, you may be forking up anywhere from a minimum of $500 or more per hour just to be able to speak to someone. Now, personally, to me, that is not a good setup. And like I say to a lot of people, if anything, it just feels like you have been set up. But that's the cycle of the system, the legalized system that we have and that we operate under. So for a lot of people who fall into that 95 to 98% that I was talking about, a lot of times they end up having to do one of three things. So I'll ask you this question. Which of these three are you? Or maybe they're all three. Have you ever contacted a 1-800 number, maybe something that you saw advertised on television late at night or in the middle of the day on a Saturday morning or during the weekday? Or maybe you came across something in the yellow pages or even just by chance a newspaper clipping. Or maybe you've had to use a public defender. I see that a lot in my line of work because a lot of the clients that we have in the juvenile population as well as the adult population, but also in the juvenile, their families don't have that kind of financial means and the wherewithal to be able to afford an attorney. So what I call is a lot of times, unfortunately, the poorest of the poor who are provided with a court-appointed attorney or a public defender. A lot of times in our circles, we call them public pretenders because they do the bare minimum. They don't have a vested interest in your case. You're just another case ID that came across their desk at 4:30 p.m. and now they have to fit you in somehow and try to go ahead and figure out what it is they're going to do. But for them, it's just another day at the office. It's repetitious. When you want honest, legal, professional representation, you want them to go ahead and take an interest in your case, because this could mean your freedom or some other equally devastating situation, okay? Or you may have been someone that has acted as their own attorney. There are people who have done it. There are people who are doing it. They represent themselves in a court of law. But I would venture to ask this, speaking from a realistic perspective, for the average Joe or Jane who's working a 40-hour work week, mind you, there are people who have suffered in this economy and are definitely, unfortunately, unemployed. But for those who are still gainfully employed, I direct this question. When would they have the time to be able to prepare a case when they've been working 8 or 9 hours a day at their job, factoring the fact that they actually have to commute to work and then commute home? When would they have the time to prepare their case? When would they even have the time to familiarize themselves with the legal jargon, as well as courtroom procedure in terms of when to speak, when to remain silent, when to present Exhibit A without stepping over the line, pissing off the judge, or being held in contempt of court, and then still try to convince a jury or judge to rule in their favor? When would they do that? How are they going to do that? Well, the next slide will show you. Blank, never, zero, next to impossible for the average Joe. Okay? Most people are not going to be able to do that, those that are working away from the home. Again, protection is important, and protection that is affordable is even more important. It's about protection, it's about security, it's about peace of mind. What if you realized that you needed to have a set of documents interpreted and read for free? Maybe you know someone that's getting ready to enter into the entertainment industry. Or maybe someone is getting ready to make a major purchase on a new home or a new vehicle or what have you. It could be any number of documents. Or maybe you're someone that needs to have their credit score improved and their name restored because they were a victim of identity theft. Or they may not have been a victim of identity theft, but for one reason or another, they ended up having a trail of bad credit that they wanted to take care of. Or maybe they need assistance with a situation, what I call the after hours consultation, because we know life does not stop at 5 p.m. Or maybe they're dealing with the IRS. They receive a letter and they're being audited. A lot of people get very nervous with that. Or you're being accused of tax fraud, felony tax fraud, which will definitely get you some time. Or maybe you're dealing with a wage garnishment, which is a real pain in the pocket. Okay? Or maybe you've purchased a vehicle, and normally when you purchase a vehicle, especially if it's new, there is a warranty. But maybe after you receive the bill of sale and by all indications everything looked okay, you drive off the lot with the car and it hasn't even been 24 hours and something is wrong under the hood of the vehicle. So there's something faulty, but maybe the manufacturer wants to give you a little bit of a difficult time about it. Not to say that it happens in every situation, but it does happen. Or maybe, unfortunately, you and your spouse are in the midst of a very painful divorce, and there are children to consider. So now you have child custody issues to look into, okay? Or you're being accused of a felony such as a DUI. Cops suddenly had probable cause to pull you over because they suspect that you're driving under the influence. Or maybe you're fighting some other serious matter, such as being accused of a hit and run, or vehicular manslaughter, or a negligent homicide, and the list goes on, okay? This is just a few of the different items. But for about 87 cents to $1 a day, is that something that would be more affordable? For me, the answer is yes, because again, think back to the idea of having to shell out $500 per hour as opposed to $1 a day. And you can do the math right there. And again, like I was saying, those are just some of the services that I'm naming. There are plenty more where that came from. And it's important to know, people, that you do not have to suffer in silence because you feel that you cannot afford legal insurance. Unfortunately, in the past, these beliefs did prevail and they once mattered, but with our legal plans, with our legal services, that myth has been shattered. So just know that you have a voice, and just know that you also have a choice, because our professional litigators, these are litigators with an A rating. They're your voice, and they are your vehicle for change. They are your agent for change. And as I was saying, that these are A-rated attorneys, so they not only have been professionally trained, they've attended law school, they've graduated from law school, they've passed the bar exam, they've received their license to practice law, they know the law, they know the difference between the spirit of the law, the letter of the law, and where to apply it. And that's what they're here for. You see, with Legal Shield, which was previously known as Prepaid Legal, but they underwent a name change in June of 2011, just to give you a little brief history there, they contract with law firms across the United States. Okay. And in doing so, these different law firms will take on our clientele as their top notch clients. So they have a desire to win without our clients. That's you, that's me, that's all of us becoming penniless in the process. And just to also let you know, in continuing to talk a little bit about the brief history, Legal Shield did come into existence by accident, literally. Our former CEO and founder of Legal Shield was Harlan Stonecipher. What had happened to him, this was back in 1971, 1972. He was injured in an auto accident. It was pretty bad, okay? And what had happened is during the course of the investigation, the investigating officers had determined that the other motorist was actually the one at fault. So you would actually think, okay, that ends it right there. We already know where fault lies. That person will go ahead, own up, and take responsibility for their actions, right? Not quite. That other motorist still decided to go ahead and pursue Mr. Stonecipher in a court of law, actually filed a lawsuit. So Harlan Stonecipher had to come out of his pocket to pay an attorney to represent and prove what had already been established at the initial investigation, that he was innocent. He was still dealing with the physical pain that occurred as a result of an accident and now had to, like I said, come out of his pocket with more money. Very, very traumatic and unfortunately a reality. But the victory did arrive because ultimately the case was thrown out and he won. But he went through so much of this mental anguish and pain, as well as an enormous amount of stress and strain because he was battling the physical injuries, trying to recover from that and still be able to hold on to his innocence without having to go shell out more money because somebody else was trying to sue him. So the fact that he went through all of that definitely, took him on a whirlspin. And that is what became the catalyst and the brainchild for Legal Shield. I say welcome to the world, Legal Shield, because that's what got the balls rolling. That's why we have this program now. We have these services now because of what happened back then. Okay. So unfortunately, yes, our CEO had endured a very difficult, trying time. But with Legal Shield, the days of difficulty are done. What he went through, you and I don't have to go through. Now, if you are still on the fence about this, let me share some information with you, some statistics that may startle you a little bit. I don't know if you are aware of it, but if you are not, know this. You have a 1 in 4 chance of being sued. Yes, you do, unfortunately. That simply means that you have a greater chance of being sued as opposed to being taken away into an emergency vehicle, dying en route, or dying waiting in the ER room. And that's already a horrible situation, but here you have a bigger chance of being sued than encountering that. Now, in the state of California, we have had cases where people have died waiting in the ER room. The videotape went viral and it was shown all over the news. And again, like I said, that's just an extremely horrible situation for that to have happened. But yet and still, you have a greater chance of facing a lawsuit. And even if you're a person who considers themselves to be at low risk because you don't anticipate anyone coming after you, think again. Because in our country, where we have anywhere from 80 to 90 million lawsuits being filed per year, that puts everyone at a certain risk. Now, some people may definitely be at a higher risk, but no one is immune. And it can happen within the blink of an eye, faster than you can think, faster than you can blink, because things happen in an instant. We live in a very litigious society. There are people who are what I call very, very sue happy. If you look at them wrong, they perceive it as a threat and they want to go after you. Look at the case, and this was a number of years ago, where a customer had actually sued a fast food restaurant because hot liquid had spilled on him. I believe it was a coffee that the individual had purchased. It spilled on the person's skin, definitely did some damage. customer filed a major lawsuit against the chain. And the only reason I remember that is because this was nationwide news. So again, it does happen. There are people who are constantly filing lawsuits, some that are legitimate and authentic, some that have a base, and others that are meritless and bogus based upon trumped up charges. All the more reason to guard yourself. Did you also know that if someone should decide to file a lawsuit against you and you choose to ignore that summons or you just fail to appear, just so you can at least address the matter and maintain your innocence, do you know what happens next? Well, I tell people, surprise, gotcha. The suing party automatically wins by default, even if you're not even the one who's truly at fault. And some people do know that, but there's a lot of people who are not aware of their rights, and they're not aware of that. But yet and still, that's what happens. So you don't want to be that kind of statistic. And this is something that happens in courtrooms across the United States 5 days a week. I encourage people, empower yourself, okay? And in doing so, arm yourself with the knowledge and the know-how, because now you know. And we have services for all kinds of situations, people from all walks of life. Whether you are an insurance agent or a broker and you'd like to share that with your clientele because you feel it's something that they could benefit from, or you're an employer and you have a set number of employees that work under you that need coverage for themselves and their families. We also have family plans that take into account the spouse and their children, or in some cases, individual plans where it's just you, that person. But there are different plans to suit different situations, services in all situations. So the ball is in your court. Keyword court. So I will ask you, after hearing that information, are you going to continue to sit on the fence, or are you going to get up and initiate a change? Because remember, your loved ones do matter. They're more precious than gold, and these plans are golden. Your family depends on you, okay? And you can depend on Legal Shield to protect your family. That's what they're here for. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just feel free to contact me at www.legalshield.com/HUB/Maxine Telford Wolf. Or if you need to speak to me directly, just feel free to go ahead and forward an email to maxinetelfordwolf@yahoo.com. And I will set up your name in a time slot that's available for a phone appointment. But I would ask that you just remember the time zones because I'm operating on Pacific Standard Time. Doesn't mean I don't want to talk to you, but I definitely wouldn't want to call you at 3 a.m. in the morning. So again, that's www.legalshield.com/hub/Maxine Telford Wolf or Maxine Telford Wolf at yahoo.com. I appreciate your time. I ask that you take care of yourself and your loved ones. Time is precious and of the essence. Legal insurance is definitely legal assurance, if you know what I mean. And if you need that contact information again, one more time, it is www.legalshield.com/hub/Maxine Telford Wolf. You can contact me there. So thank you. Thank you again for coming. And have a good one.